I mean, that's the same throughout Europe. They have big deals in place with all the major European incumbents. So any kind of action against Huawei is going to be much more significant than what's happening with
100%.
ZTE, which is a relatively small company. But
Hi, this is Jamie Davis, and welcome to the Telecoms.com podcast. So this week we got a couple of holidays. So we've got a new cast. Iain is back after a football injury.
kind of a football injury. Yeah, made it sound a bit worse than it was, but yeah,
I'm intrigued.
yeah.
No,
It was just a stupid thing with the kids. And
he got nutmegged by Alex, basically. And Wei. For our
Hello.
for your first time on the podcast?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, so 3 weeks in the job now?
4.
4 weeks in the job.
Yeah.
He's
Still trying to overcome
our
the
new
stage fright.
in-house analyst,
Yeah.
and going to be offering us a wealth of knowledge. So just as a reminder before Pierre freaks out,
Look at you remembering.
if you're watching this on SoundCloud or iTunes, you can actually also watch the video on YouTube and Facebook.
Yeah, correct.
And if you're watching on Facebook or YouTube, you can download the audio content of SoundCloud or iTunes.
Perfect.
So this week we're going to be talking about Nokia's numbers, the last of the big vendors. We're also going to be talking about Convergence. It's been a big week for the Convergence strategy. And finally, we're going to touch on China. There's a couple of interesting things which have been happening over in the Chinese market, and I think it's had some pretty notable impacts on the rest of the world. So just to kick things off, I have no idea what happened in Nokia. I didn't actually write the story, I didn't look at the numbers, but I think where you covered it for the Telecoms.com site, and Iain, you covered it for the Light Reader site. So I'm going to hand over to one of you.
Well,
Okay.
you
Fight
might
to the
start
death.
to a big start. The big picture.
yeah, I mean, this chair's very squeaky. Yeah, it's nothing to do with Nokia, obviously, but yeah, their earnings were a bit squeaky, I suppose, as well. They kind of share price went down quite a bit on the morning they reported, and the main issue was sort of margin shrinkage. Really, the sales seemed to hold up reasonably well, but operating profits on the network side of the business went right down. I think the margin was sort of down to about 1.5% from 8% a year ago.
So was that the reverse of what happened a couple of the last quarter? Because I think they
were down in the last quarter,
to calm everyone down about.
The odd thing last time in the first quarter, a similar thing happened. I think their margins weren't looking so good in the morning, and the share price went right down. And then Rajiv Suri, the CEO, got on the earnings call in the afternoon because their earnings call's quite delayed, and when 5G business is going to pick up in the second half of the year. Well, it's going to start appearing in the second half of the year, rather not pick up, and that's going to be the start of the spending boom, and everything's going to be great. And the share price went right back up again. And this time round, it didn't quite work out the same way. It sort of recovered a bit in the afternoon when the earnings call was on, because I think he soothed a few nerves. But it was still.
Voice,
I think it was.
Isn't it?
Yeah, he is. I think it was still down 5%. I mean, I think there was a bit of panic in the morning, and I know some analysts are saying, well, they seem to be a little bit more cautious about when this sort of 5G spending is going to begin. I think they were sort of last time round, they were saying second half of the year. They've pushed it back a little bit. It's sort of fourth quarter probably before we see the big kind of spending going on in North America. And one of the other issues on the margin side was apparently some customers sort of funding upgrades from existing budgets, so not sort of spending more, but using what they'd already allocated for kind of network improvements to start preparing for 5G, and it's almost like Nokia had sort of assumed previously that wasn't going to happen. But this seems to have had some impact on the margins, and I don't feel that was that well explained why the margins are as weak as they are. I mean, I don't know whether you dug into that any more than I did, but it's certainly. It's interesting because if you look at what's happening at Ericsson at the moment, and if we go back to this time last year, Ericsson was sort of seen as the player that was really suffering, had that horrible period when, Vestberg had left and they were struggling to kind of stop the rot, and they had a new CEO who was trying to get to grips with things. And all of a sudden Ericsson's now the company that seems to be doing quite well. Its margins have really been recovering. It kind of turned a corner in the last.
They got some good prospects on the horizon as well, haven't they?
Yeah,
I mean, even from like the Verizon deal. I mean, their ex-CEO is in charge of the.
I mean, that's a great
business
thing
now.
for them to have Hans Vestberg all of a sudden being the main man at Verizon.
Oh, yeah.
They're already talking about more business from that, but they seem to have this. One thing they've been doing is putting a lot more money into R&D spending.
Okay.
Which seems to have, and they've also been cutting jobs. So they've cut about 20,000 jobs since June 2016, I think. So massive cutbacks on costs, but also kind of ring fencing R&D and ensuring that any of the cuts don't affect that. And that the combination of those two seems to have had this kind of restoring effect on the margins. And they're still off their targets of getting up to sort of 10% at group level by 2020, but they're kind of heading in the right direction.
R&D levels?
So the operating profit margin.
Oh,
basically.
right. Sorry.
I can't remember what it is at the moment, but their target for 2020, certainly at the overall group. And you've got to remember that digital services and other bits of the business are kind of weighing quite heavily. The network side's doing pretty well, but other bits of Ericsson are sort of weighing heavily on those numbers.
So who's doing well? Who's looking like they're leading the race in the North American market? I mean, because Huawei discounted, ZTE discounted.
Yeah.
You got to look at Ericsson and Nokia.
Yeah, it's
I mean,
pretty much those two.
It's those two. I mean, it's only
but
those.
Who's winning out of those two?
I think Suri was asked if he was losing market share in the earnings call, and he said no. And Ericsson was also asked if it was gaining market share, and they said it's too early for us to say at the moment. So I think it's still very neck and neck. I mean, I think
It's pretty much so.
Ericsson's done a very good job, obviously, on the cost reduction side, and this business of there seems to be this suggestion that the R&D spending increase has led to more profitable products. So, and I remember talking to Gabriel about this as well. He was saying the new platform they have, this new sort of baseband platform, which can be upgraded, software upgrades, it's very profitable technology for them to be using. So that seems to have had some kind of impact on the margins. But in terms of actually winning business and securing deals, Nokia insists that it's not losing market share. It's got things coming up in the North American pipeline. And if you talk to some of the analysts as well, the guys who track the numbers and put buy and hold recommendations on these companies, they're kind of saying, well, let's just wait a bit and see what happens in the fourth quarter. Nokia's going to bounce back. So,
but are they actually signing any deals at the moment, or is it still the exploratory
They're not announcing any new deals yet. But in his sort of result releasing speech, Suri was saying, our win rate is pretty good, and we are attacking some selected verticals that would, I believe, that would diversify their client base beyond the telcos, and that would be helpful, especially in the 4G.
Yeah,
era.
They seem to be doing quite well there. There's quite a big increase on that side.
But the one thing I haven't seen with Nokia or Ericsson is them actually saying, we've got 5G deals in place.
Yeah.
Now, but with Samsung, for instance, that Verizon deal is massive. With the fixed wireless access in California, is it?
Right.
I mean, that's that's big win for Samsung, and that
but
must be a bit of a kick in the teeth for the
a week ago.
else.
A week ago, I think Nokia announced a 1 billion frame agreement with China Mobile, something like that. So
I think
it was pretty big, but I mean, it's not a deal. It's a memorandum of understanding. So things may change, but it's a good sign that they're winning some.
None of it's really 5G at the moment.
Because
there isn't any 5G, and I think if you ask. There's a lot of stuff about, we're seeing a pickup in 5G business, but if you ask them honestly, I spoke with Ericsson's chief marketing officer after the earnings came out, and she said, well, look, it's not really 5G at the moment, obviously. It's laying the groundwork
It just
for
doesn't
that.
exist, does it?
You get these press release statements that talk about 5G deals, but really what they're selling at the moment is equipment that in time will be software upgradable. They're not selling the new radios that go with, the frequencies that have been introduced and often haven't been licensed yet anyway. They're selling...
it's despite what some say. I mean, I think, I wasn't at the press for the press session in Mobile Congress, but it didn't... I can never remember his name, but the Nokia CEO, he had a pop at Ericsson saying, no, I mean 5G ready, 5G upgradable. That's not a thing.
Yeah, well, that was interesting because they're now talking about 5G upgradable stuff anyway.
So when it's finished, it's decent, but when it's Swedish, it's a load of shit.
Yeah, I mean, his statement on their earnings, Suri's statement, specifically makes reference to their AirScale platform, which is kind of the same thing as the Ericsson radio system. It's a baseband platform that, when the software's ready, you can just upgrade it to 5G. You don't have to swap out any hardware components. So they have the same claim, and Huawei's the same. It says, we're selling we're selling, hardware now that in time you'll just be able to use a software upgrade to get it
Future-proof,
to get it up to. I mean, it doesn't mean there's no new hardware that's going to be sold. There will be a lot of new hardware that needs installing as well when they start to roll out 5G. But it's part of the upgrade, part of the hardware upgrade is being done, I guess, at the moment.
Do you know how much it costs when you're looking at the sort of the 5G sites with like massive MIMO and the sort of small cells you're spreading around the place? How much does one of these cell sites actually cost? Is it more expensive than what is there today? Because I saw an interesting graphic
it
from
will
Verizon.
be more expensive, especially for the site acquisition, because it's getting more and more difficult to acquire new sites. And
no, I'm talking about the gear now. The actual kit on the sites.
Yeah, that's...
Well, I think that the massive MIMO technology is supposed to be really expensive.
Because there was an interesting graphic that came out of a Verizon Analyst Day, and it was they had 4G sites on one side and a theoretical 5G and small cell sites on the other side. And you could see that there was substantially less 5G sites than there were 4G sites. So my question is, if the kit isn't more expensive and the software isn't more expensive, this efficiency is ultimately going to cost Nokia, Ericsson, Huawei a lot more because the number of sites is a lot smaller.
No, the number of sites will go up because we are moving up the frequency, meaning the coverage of each site will be smaller. So you will need more sites to cover the similar
I think they'll be installing more. So you have your existing
But small
grid.
cells are substantially smaller and much more efficient and much more cost effective than a current 4G sites. That's what my point is.
Yeah, so in areas where they launch, so you've got your existing network grid at the moment with your towers and everything, and this is happening in Germany, for instance, that Deutsche Telekom's towers arm has started to up the rate at which it builds new sites, because it says partly because it's going to need more sites for 5G, because as you say, you're moving up the frequency band, so you can't cover as much territory with a site. But what will happen is they're not going to blanket countries with 5G very quickly. It's going to take a really long time. I mean, anybody who thinks that 5G is going to be nationwide in the next soon after it's rolled out, because I think this is the other thing. You listen to the service providers and a lot of the noise from America. We're going to launch 5G in late 2018, in some bits of 12 cities for AT&T. It's not It's not going to be blanket coverage for a long time.
Sacramento for Verizon, or
it's. I mean, 4G itself. If you look at the story of 4G, it's taken a long time to roll out. It's still not at 100% coverage in a lot of markets, and it's been going up. You go back a few years, it wasn't in markets like the UK. There was a lot of areas that didn't have 4G coverage, and 5G will be probably even possibly longer.
Today.
Because there's less. The other thing is, what's the business case for doing it? In the first case, they need it for capacity boost in sort of busy areas. They need. This is where they're going to target first, especially in Europe. They'll be going into busy urban hotspots where there's traffic congestion and there's more demand for high-speed services on smartphones, and they'll be using it to sort of plug those holes.
Well, this is part of what Telefonica said the other day. They've got a deal with Arqiva in place now, where they're going to be building over the next 12 months, I think it is, 300 small cell sites in and around certain boroughs in London. And the theory is 2019 they can just
they're going to do it.
Flick the switch.
They're going to do it for fixed wireless access, are they? Telefonica, is that what they're talking about?
Oh no, this is
partly?
just like 5G services.
This is 5G. And
capacity,
using Arqiva for sort of backhaul. Is that what they're? Arqiva, they're using sort of microwave for backhaul, or
I think so. I'm not 100%.
Because Arqiva is making a big sort of play on this FWA thing, isn't it, in London? That it can compete against fibre, but
they have no intentions. I mean, we're getting ahead of ourselves here, Ian. It's the next topic, convergence. Next topic. Well, we can actually move on to it now. Actually, then. We can. Unless you got anything else to add on about Nokia.
No, I think the top line numbers are not looking too good, but at the same time, if you break that down, I'm really impressed by one business unit. It's their Nokia Technologies. So that's the unit that licenses out their IPR and the brand to other partners, and that's generating now nearly 90% of the total profits. With only 7% of the revenues.
And the other bit I'd say that's doing quite well is their software side of things. This is where Ericsson's not doing very well, is on digital services, and things like virtualized core networks and the OSS systems, all that's under digital services, and they're like a key piece of the 5G network. So Nokia has this big thing at the moment where it says we can provide end-to-end deals. We can do everything, and I think in that respect they're in a much better position than Ericsson. So maybe not as strong on the network side, but better than Ericsson on the sort of end-to-end side of things is my kind of broad take on it.
So Suri was stressing the solution part of Nokia's product. So,
Okay, well, and on to Convergence. So Convergence. There's three areas I want to point at this week. 3 companies. So Nokia. What am I on about? Orange doing Convergence very well.
Yep.
Telefonica UK couldn't care less about Convergence. Virgin Media in the UK, Convergence done very, very badly. Why don't you kick us off? Because I know you wrote the Orange numbers. And
I can
covered them
provide some
very
insight on
briefly.
Orange, and the other ones not so much. But I mean, Orange is its results for the last 2 or 3 quarters, I think, have been really encouraging. And if you talk to analysts, I think it's generally seen as one of the better performing incumbents in Europe. And as you say, I think a lot of this is driven by. It's very interesting actually contrasting Orange with Vodafone in Spain, which is a market where they're both competing in extremely competitive market. Vodafone not doing so well. Vodafone had a pretty bad. So the Vodafone's earnings results this quarter, it's real pressure points at the moment are Italy, which has been the result of Iliad.
Well, Iliad is just causing chaos.
It's causing chaos, and the other pressure point is Spain. And Kalau said on the earnings call, he said it's just a super competitive market. You've got 4 companies there, I think, now offering converged products. And one of them is very aggressive on price. MásMóvil, I think, is the sort of low-cost challenger there. And it's really hit. Vodafone hasn't had a good response to this, obviously. Whereas Orange, I think, in terms of both sales and profits, are massively up in Spain.
I saw their convergent offers were across the group. It was up 9% again.
Yeah, I mean, I think they'd actually lost some customers,
numbers.
but got existing customers spending more, managed to get companies. I mean, this is what BT's talking about doing as well. It's focused less on growing.
They said something like about 18 million SIMs are now on the converged offers. I mean, that's a huge number.
So this getting people to buy, mobile customers who are only on mobile, getting them to take fixed line services, getting them to take. They just seem to have done quite a good job of dealing with this. And in the French market as well, where they've got Iliad's been active there for quite a long time. A bit of a thorn in the side of the kind of established players. Orange is doing really well. It's like it's. I think sales are up sort of 1.5% maybe, and maybe it was a bit more, but they kind of.
So this is part of the reason why I like the Orange Convergence plays, because they spent so long getting the core basics. There are
people who say they need to do more. So our friend Paolo Pescatore, who used to be at CCS Insight and is now independent, I was chatting to him about Orange, and he feels they need to perhaps be more aggressive, because they've not been one of the companies they're still quite wary of sort of going out and spending heavily on content. I think they have some deals in place with like Canal Plus in France, but they've been less willing than some other operators. I mean, certainly if you look at what's gone on in the US market with the big deal with AT&T and Time Warner.
I'm all right with it though, because I think that the aggregator model and just offering choice is a very good one for telcos. The business model isn't set up for them to do content very well. They don't have the right people, they don't have the right mentality, and they don't have the right risk profile to go out and secure these licenses. Why not? I quite like the Orange strategy.
What's your view on the whole, the big comparison that people make when they talk about this is the AT&T Time Warner deal, but what's your kind of take on where that's going to go? Because there's been some criticism of that recently, hasn't it, with them sort of wading in and saying you're messing around with a really successful business model.
There's a couple of companies around the world which are really doing very, very good things and looking like they are probably the most stable telcos worldwide. And, you look at probably T-Mobile in the States. Okay, they got a nutter in charge, but I mean, could you say that there is a better business, a healthier business in terms of growing subscriber numbers, healthy profit margin, not much debt? That's a really healthy company. Orange, incredibly healthy company as well. You can just look at their numbers every single time. You look at Geo's done very well. And what is it? Because they've offered basic services very well. And then they're looking to go elsewhere. This is my problem with Convergence, is that a lot of people go into do content or go into do sort of like fibre, or they go into alternative services to compensate for the losses they're making in their core business, when convergence is done right, you nail your core business and look for other things as a bonus.
Yeah.
Which is, I think, the big difference.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean,
No, I agree. I mean, it also depends on which route you take. Whether you do the AT&T way, which is you splash out cash and you buy loads of premium content and you package it one way or another on Time Warner, or I mean our recent but pretty high profile case is Verizon, who just wrote off their Go 90 venture into original content but on mobile short form content. And they've been struggling it for 3-4 years and never really found the foot. So that's why that brought me to agree with you in the sense that you need to do the basics right. So Telefonica's strategy here in the UK, I think it's sound.
Yeah,
in the
yeah.
sense I'm
this is the we're not going to get involved with convergence.
Yeah, well, not yet. They did a bit. They just tied a partnership with Netflix, right?
Yeah, but I mean, I'm quite
sort of packaged, bundled deal.
But I'm all right with that because they're so
that's different. Yeah,
so when I was out with I sort of met with them the other night, and their strategy is we'll do connectivity very well. We'll do it cheaply. We'll increase coverage, and we'll really empower you to choose the content you want. We're not going to do content. We're just going to make it easier for you to, access YouTube anywhere. Access, we'll set up partnerships so you can actually go through.
If you want
Netflix.
What about their whole sort of broadband strategy though? Because they don't really have a play there, do they? They don't have a fixed broadband play, and that's obviously the other bit of convergence. It's not just the content, but it's having. I mean, that's maybe for me a bigger issue is companies that can offer packages
fixed
of
lines.
not even content so much, because there's so much available over the top now that it's dubious whether it's needed. But certainly the ability to have a fixed line offer and a mobile offer together seems to be increasingly important in a lot of European markets.
This
if you can't buy that, then
Telefonica are doing it everywhere else, though, aren't they? And
they're certainly doing it in Spain.
Doing
obviously,
doing it in Germany, I think, as well, aren't they?
I'm not sure.
They got
I'm not
fixed
sure,
line in
but
Germany.
I think they have a wholesale agreement with Deutsche Telekom to provide broadband services. I don't think they have their own network infrastructure. I don't know about that for certain, but
they, I mean, from what Mark Evans said the other night, it was literally a case of we haven't got an interest in it yet.
Right.
We're the number one mobile player in the UK market.
Yeah.
They're not gonna get massive subscriber numbers every single month.
Yeah.
Every single quarter. That's not their target. Protect what they got, marginally grow their market share in mobile. And he turned around and he said the big opportunity for us is enterprise. 5G, he said we've got like an almost non-existent business in enterprise as it stands.
Yeah.
We're a massive challenger, so that's where we're going to make a huge amount of money, which is, for me, sensible. Enterprise is risky.
Yeah.
And they also just acquired some new frequency, right?
So they're building out their 4G.
Yeah.
Well, they got, in theory, so they spent 500 odd million.
I can't remember what the overall spending was 1.4 billion, wasn't it, during that auction? But I can't remember it's probably 400. Yeah.
They spent a lot, and it was to bolster their 5G.
They got some 2.3 gigahertz as well.
For their
didn't they?
4G coverage.
Yeah.
But that's the reason they're the leader, and they're probably not going to. And
Yeah.
he probably isn't going to take it away from them.
I'm not going to say they're wrong, because it's not really be arrogant to say I think they're wrong. I just wonder if that strategy in future will look risky when everybody else is making a fuss about convergence, and if people increasingly start to buy these services where it's just easy to get your broadband
Single
and
bill,
your mobile,
churns down.
Lower cost as well. That's the other thing. You're spending less on your mobile and you fix together than if you got them separately. Is that going to leave a company like O2 looking a bit exposed in the future? Are they going to change their mind about that?
I like convergence. I think when it's done properly, it's a very, very sound and very good business strategy. But I just think it's done badly too often.
Yeah.
And you're right. I think it's easier to sell 3 services to one customer than it is to sell 1 service to 3 customers.
Yeah.
It's also far more cost effective.
Yeah, but you're right about them not doing it very well though a lot of the time. I mean the BT and EE is a classic example. Maybe they're starting to get their act together now, but for a long time, that BTEE deal, which is completed in 2016, I think.
Yeah,
it's a
quite
little
a while
while
ago.
ago now, and
Yeah.
I still get sort of. I mean, I'm a customer of both, but take separate services. You still get sort of phone calls from EE asking if you want EE's own broadband service, which is sort of resold on the BT network.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of, you can see the sort of issues that they face organisationally in terms of trying to bring together different departments and make sure the branding is consistent, the message is consistent. And
So I've
it seems
heard
like they've
that-
got a long way to go. Sometimes.
So I've heard basically, even though it was BT that bought EE, the EE guys have basically come in and taken over.
Yeah,
and it is
their
very
executives
much-
are moving into the top spots. Yeah,
It's very
yeah.
much a case of EE was a healthier business than BT, so we're going to have the senior guys EE rather than BT. But also talking about Convergence done badly brings us on to Virgin Media.
Yep.
And
Well, you
the
know
whole-
about that. I've been oblivious to that a little bit this week. But
Oh.
it's in the headlines, obviously, about ITV. But
UK TV.
UK TV. Sorry, yeah.
It's an absolute disaster. They wanted UK TV offers all their packages as a bundle. Some of them are free, as in they're on Freeview channels and you can watch them online for free.
Yeah.
And some of them, like Dave and Alibi, are premium that you have to pay for. They
For
offer
Dave.
it's
Wow.
a really, really popular channel.
I know.
It's one of the most popular channels
It's on
on
Freeview.
Freeview
Yeah.
and on. No, it's not on Freeview.
Dave,
Uh,
it
it
is.
does.
I
There's
like-
a lot
I
of
like their,
reruns,
Channel
right?
12.
I like the name
Okay.
of their catch-up channel, Deja Vu.
Deja
Yeah,
Vu.
yeah,
I like
plus
that.
one.
Brilliant. That is like that's the best thing about
It's Dave
Dave.
plus one, yeah.
Dave
plus
Javu.
1 hour. So
But they had so all of this comes as one bundle, and if you own a TV platform, you can only buy it as a bundle. But Virgin Media turned around and said, no, we don't want the premium ones. We actually just want the free ones.
Yeah.
UK TV said that ain't happening. We're not a charity. We don't give away our stuff for free. And so the relationship broke down. And on Saturday night, UK TV just turned off all the channels on Virgin Media. Said you're not allowed to have it. Customers are up in arms. I was a Virgin Media customer until 6-7 months ago, and I can tell you that the platform is substandard.
nobody watches live TV anymore.
Yeah, I mean it was awful.
Yeah.
I mean, probably one of the best things about it was the bloody Dave channel. And then so there's loads of TV. So this is UK TV's up on a high horse, and they're clopping along, looking down on a lot of very poor people,
Yeah.
saying, you can't get the channels for cheaper, but still maintain the subscription prices for your customer. UK TV's up on its high horse, saying, we're protecting the customer, but they're protecting their business model, and I think it's perfectly reasonable.
Yeah.
But loads of people are complaining. 50,000 mentions on Twitter or something like that. The story we wrote, all the comments on it were basically people saying, I can't believe they actually do this. Worse service, same price. Give me 3 months. I'm getting out and I'm going to Sky. So I think this is a prime example of Convergence done terribly and it negatively impacting the rest of the business.
Yeah.
So, but yeah.
I wonder whether this gets back to your point about.
Meanwhile, Richard Branson is talking about his book. That's it.
Is he?
Yeah, in his rocket ship. Yeah.
He's got
always
nothing-
a new
he's got
plan.
nothing to
got
do
nothing
with
to
it.
do
I know,
with
but
it.
still, come on.
It's all Liberty, isn't it? Now
He gets
so-
paid. How much does he get paid? He gets paid X amount. A
Is he
couple
got
of mil,
1% or something? I don't know.
5-6 million a year for him
Right.
to use the
That's
Virgin
it.
brands.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
He just sort of franchises out his
Yeah,
name, doesn't
basically.
he? Basically.
That's quite cheap.
But this gets back to your point about sort of AT&T and Time Warner. I just wonder whether these these channels that focused on linear content and big plays to go and acquire companies that have done that and spent lots of money on production, but streamed things in a kind of traditional way, not streamed it, broadcast it.
Yeah.
Whether those kinds of takeovers really make sense at all in the kind of Netflix and Amazon era where everything's getting disaggregated. You're spending very small amounts of money per month. I mean,
I think it still does. To start with,
Yeah.
not all the new shows will go on
Yeah,
Netflix
but this
or
is-
Amazon.
But this is my point. So HBO, for example, which his most popular show is probably Game of Thrones, in recent years. I mean, I've watched that and I've enjoyed watching it. And since coming off Sky a couple of years ago, obviously can't get it anymore. But you only have to wait until the series is finished, and then all of a sudden it's available on Amazon.
Well, apparently you're not a hardcore follower. If you are, you want to watch it at the first instance.
Yeah.
And that doesn't happen on Netflix or Amazon unless it's their original content. And I believe that's what the management of those companies were thinking. Where is the next Game of Thrones? So linear TV.
But they're spending money on their own shows now as well, aren't they?
They do,
I mean,
yeah.
Amazon's planning on spending about as much as it costs to make Game of Thrones on a new
That's
series of
right,
Lord of the Rings,
yeah.
apparently. So.
And Netflix just
Really?
announced
Yeah.
that.
Which seems like a weird thing to me after the films of a few years ago, but
Yeah.
but
Is there
apparently
any
they
more
are.
to be said? Come on.
No, Netflix has just tied a partnership in Spain because that their first sort of European partnership to produce original content.
Yeah.
Yeah,
in
there's
Europe.
a few. Yeah.
Yeah.
I know they don't sort of have the quality reputation that maybe an HBO has in terms
Yeah.
of award-winning shows. They a lot of the stuff they put out is viewed as being
Well,
Yeah.
who?
Netflix.
Oh,
Yeah.
they have a few House of Cards and all that stuff.
They have a
That's
few,
They've got
but
House of
not the-
Cards,
not
but they've
the-
not got.
Stranger Things, you know.
They've
That's
got a
not
lot of
award-winning,
shit
though,
though.
is it?
Yeah, it's won
Is
some awards for sure. Yeah.
They got
They
a
got a
lot.
lot of rubbish, a lot of Adam
Yeah,
Sandler
yeah,
type
yeah.
stuff.
If you talk
Um,
to Jesse, so I know he doesn't work here anymore, but if you talk to Jesse Whittack and you go to these content shows, and they just said they have sort of Netflix execs everywhere snapping up as much content as possible. I think it sounds like, although they picked a few winners, and it must be very, very difficult to pick out a winner from
Well,
a show.
it seems to be in a sort of let's splash as much
Yeah,
money as
I
possible,
think
and
so.
a few things will be good, but a
that's
lot
why
of
they're
stuff
still
will be
they're still
bad.
losing money.
Whereas
They're
HBO
kidding.
has a let's be more targeted kind of approach.
No,
to
but
it,
the problem
or has
is
had.
it's not only on content; it's different business models. So the linear TV is still based on, subscription being one thing, still largely relying on advertising.
Yeah.
So advertisement is still, I think, generating quite a bit of their income. And if you look at the advertising market, the spending on linear TV is still higher than on other platforms. So in that sense, it still makes sense to own the linear channel. Of
Yeah,
content
I mean,
distribution.
for the moment, I think so.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think 85 billion is a lot for a short-lived
Well,
glory.
I mean, the story in the
it
US
is,
very much is
yeah.
about cable cutting at the moment, isn't it?
Yeah.
And people dumping
Yeah.
these channels
Yeah.
because of Amazon and Netflix. And I just wonder whether being able to watch Game of Thrones when it comes out instead of waiting for 10 weeks is really enough to.
Or you
to
can
reverse
just go on
that
one of the
trend,
dodgy sites
know,
on the internet and just watch
or
it.
or
on
doing
there.
that.
What if they made Netflix free but with commercials? What would you think about
Well,
that?
maybe they will move
Yeah.
to an advertising model though. Netflix.
I think
Well,
there will- I
Netflix,
think that might
there's
be an
no
option.
there's no advertising.
But
there
maybe,
is-
maybe that will change.
What
no?
if they did that? How would you feel about it?
Then if they
I wouldn't like
reduce
it.
if they reduce the subscription as
if
a
they
consequence
waive it
of-
completely.
The thing
It's
that
free.
the subscriptions are more likely to go up, aren't they? I think is the general sort of
Yeah,
analyst view.
I think it's. I
Yeah.
mean, we're cheap over here anyway. I mean, what is it like $8.99 in the UK?
$7.99.
It's going to go up.
$7.99.
I mean,
It's
there's a
about-
point.
How much is it in the US?
I
think
don't know
it's
what it is. but
$10.99.
I think their strategy is to try and increase it every year until they get to a point when they see what impact it has on
Yeah.
subscribers. There's a kind of sweet spot where people
Yeah.
are prepared to pay maybe 14 or 15.
Equilibrium.
But more than that, they're
Yeah.
going to go.
Yeah.
Hang on a minute.
It is
It's very
cheap.
cheap at the moment. Yeah.
yeah.
For the because you do get some quality. You get a lot of
It's
shit
like a
on there.
pint and a half.
Yeah. Well, yeah. more
I
like
mostly
that.
watch all Netflix stuff.
Yeah, I watch mainly Netflix stuff.
I mean, I turned on like normal TV the other day. I was like, oh yeah, that old thing.
I'm
And
the
it's
same.
done in HD.
Yeah,
You know, it's
yeah.
standard definition. I'm like,
Well, I pay subscription, but don't really watch it. So
How are we looking for time, Pierre?
yeah, good.
Good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we're gonna quickly move on to the last one because I think there's a couple of things that we want to discuss around China. I didn't write the first story this week, so I haven't actually looked into it that much. I know some background knowledge on NXP.
Yeah.
But I think Scott did it for Telecoms.com.
yeah, Scott did that one.
Did
yeah.
you do it?
I covered it.
Okay. So fill
Well,
us
I mean,
in.
if you have.
No, you go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, it's so the deal. I covered it very lightly, so I'll have to
You
I'll have
brushed
to be
it.
careful. But yeah, I mean it's not my area at all. It's
Yeah,
the chips side of things. But Qualcomm, obviously the big sort of US mobile chips company, has had this deal in the pipeline for a long time to buy NXP Semiconductors, which is I think headquartered in the
Is it
Netherlands.
Dutch?
The Netherlands.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
it started with Philips,
and has
So
a very
the P
strong
is
position, as I
Philips.
understand it, in connected cars, and it was part of Qualcomm's strategy to sort of beef up its position in that market in IoT. And it would have been one of the biggest tech deals ever, this $44 billion takeover they had in the pipeline. They managed to get all the sort of regulatory permissions they needed in just about everywhere.
Yeah, I think
But
8 out of 9 countries.
8 out of 9,
yeah,
that's it,
they-
yeah.
they
And
got
then
approval.
the one that hadn't agreed was China, and they
Bloody
needed that
Chinese.
because apparently a lot of the businesses in China. So that was kind of crucial, and it had been held up till the deadline this week for getting that permission passed, which means the deal's basically off. And the feeling is, I think, among market watchers, is that this is possibly a kind of Chinese retaliation, if you like.
I think
to,
so. I think it's a bit of a
collateral
pause.
damage.
to
Yeah.
to tariff moves and the whole
Tariff
trade
moves
war
and
thing.
ZTE.
Possibly ZTE as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, all the stuff that's been happening there. This is sort of because China doesn't have the same kind of weapons as the US in terms of raising tariffs. It buys a lot less. It imports a lot less from the US, obviously, than it sells. So
God, it was
this is the kind of way for them to hit back, I guess.
the US. I mean, that was just that was an economic dirty bomb they dropped on ZTE, wasn't it? I mean, it just shows the power of Silicon Valley.
Yeah.
You know, you stop any trading with the US, and you basically can't function as an organisation.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I think so much of ZTE's, so much of its products used US components from
I heard something like
And
70%.
software as
likes
well.
of Qualcomm and Intel, but also like these little tiny optical guys like Acacia, I think.
Yeah,
and
I heard something like
so-
70% of
yeah,
their supply
70 to
chain.
80% or something. So they, as soon as that was as soon as that ban was in place, they were basically screwed, which is why they kind of stopped business operations. And
Yeah.
but yeah, this is kind of seen as China's way of so that deal's completely off now.
Yeah, but it cost them
Qualcomm's
$2
trying to
billion.
put a brave face on things and say that it's not really affecting its strategy, but it doesn't really make sense, obviously,
And
because a deal
cost
of
them,
that
cost
size
them
is,
$2 billion.
it's cost them $2
anyway,
billion as a
yeah.
breakup
So,
fee. Yeah.
Wow.
And
Lawyers.
I think there's some stuff on the web today about it. I haven't read the stories today, but there was
I
some
haven't read much on it.
China sort of saying something like the deadline passed because they hadn't sort of dealt with everything we asked them to, or something. And I didn't read the details of it, but they're not sort of saying that they
Deliberately
refused,
blocked
that it was
it,
deliberate
yeah,
and they were
yeah.
blocking it. They're sort of saying, well, they didn't satisfy all of
they
our
forgot.
requirements.
They didn't do
they're sort of
everything we
shifting
asked them to.
yeah, shifting the buck a bit.
Yeah.
Well,
So,
I mean, it's hardly unexpected. I mean, it's the sort of thing you were going to happen. I mean, it was always going to be finger pointing. You know, this is your fault. This is your fault, and ultimately, that's what. You know, Qualcomm just got caught in the middle of the political game,
But
which
this-
is my
this
view on it.
This is all sort of engulfing everybody now, isn't it? And especially in our sector, you know,
Yeah,
with
yeah,
the
yeah.
concerns about Huawei and ZTE and the kind of. I mean, there's still a lot of, despite ZTE having this deal that it's got now to lift the ban if it pays this, which is I think is now it's sort of agreed to pay this fine, hasn't it, and change management figures and put in some
the
other
US
processes.
has to put in like its own compliance
Put in its own
team or
compliance
something
team,
like that,
exactly.
yeah.
But there's still a lot of concern about its future because it's racked up a lot of losses. I mean, I don't think it's published earnings yet for the second quarter, and maybe there's a delay to that because of what's been going on.
I mean,
but,
ultimately, you've got to be a bit terrified if you're buying off ZTE. You know, you got to think to yourself. You build your supply chain.
well, but they've
around
lost
that.
deals, haven't
They've
they?
lost so many deals.
I mean,
I'd be terrified.
Wind
about
Tre in
buying
Italy is
off
the
them.
most the one that's been in the public eye where they
So
had a big deal in
Ericsson
place. They were like a
swapping,
flagship
yeah.
customer of ZTE, and all of a sudden Ericsson's now got that business.
All of a sudden, yeah. What about the consumer side of things? Because they got a big handset division.
Yep.
You know, if they turn off, if the US decides to stop them doing that again, Android just disappears off their phones, and their phones are about as useful as this Rubik's cube, which
Inherited from Ray.
So their phones become instantly useless, as does Huawei when if it does
Well,
head
there's
down that
concern
route.
about Huawei, isn't there? Even I think
Yeah.
your friends at Telefonica were reported to be saying, I think it was in the Telegraph today, that they are less exposed to Huawei in the UK market. They're
did
not
say
as
that the
reliant
other day.
on. Which is
said-
an interesting comment to make. you know,
But
it's not-
Mark Evans, he said they are more reliant on they're mainly Nokia and Ericsson.
right.
No ZTE,
Yeah.
and not that dependent. But ultimately, there's nothing really that much to worry about with Huawei. Because, if
the
I
UK
was
authorities are starting to say, hang on a minute, this is a security threat in the same way the US did
Yeah,
a few
the
years
story
ago.
you wrote.
But if I'm a Huawei employee, so many networks are so utterly reliant on Huawei
Yeah.
that you can't get rid of them. You know,
Yeah.
if you get rid of Huawei and say, we're not going to do anything Huawei from now on, can you imagine the state of the UK network? It would fall apart. I mean, there's a division in GCHQ which specifically monitors Huawei because of how reliant our network is on them. You know, it's the whole. It's like
they were only very recently named as one of BT's main sort of fibre first suppliers, along with Nokia, I think. So. They are kind of. I mean, that's the same throughout Europe. They have big deals in place with all the major European incumbents. So any kind of action against Huawei is going to be much more significant than what's happening with ZTE, which is a relatively small company. But I think there's a big question mark still over ZTE's future, because that fine's pretty substantial as a percentage of what it generates in sales.
How much was the fine?
The fine's 1.4 billion, including the escrow
it's about
payments.
10% of their annual revenues.
I think their annual's about 16 or 17 or something.
So just below,
But they also had this fine last year that they paid. They've paid. This comes on top of the billion they paid last year, 900 million last year.
Some companies.
And their losses have been quite substantial while they've been basically not doing anything for 3 months. But,
and if you look forward, if I'm a current customer, I'm using ZTE, that's fine. I survived this round, and how about next round? So I better have a contingency plan. So it's people moving away from being solely reliant on ZTE to having a couple of providers in place. I think a lot of companies had sort of gone, we'll get really favourable deals if we give everything to ZTE, which looked good at the time economically. But now everybody's saying, well, hang on, are there going to be these measures taken against Chinese companies, and maybe we need to have more players in the mix, and so it's changing the kind of deal making environment. I think what's happening.
I mean, the other thing I wanted to talk about in China, very briefly before we finish up, is Facebook. Something we were talking about just beforehand, and I think this just shows the power of, we were talking about the power of the American economy there, the American supply chain, and you look at China, the reason why everyone's willing to put up with the demands of the Chinese government is because of the consumer there. Like Facebook, for instance, it's getting zero growth. Well, it's not getting zero growth. It's getting about 10-11% growth in users every year on year, which is nowhere near high enough if it wants to sustain marketing, the marketing budgets or the advertising revenues. How about an extra billion people in China? When is it going to crack the Great Chinese Firewall? And then that will an extra billion customers.
They've got their own big sort of internet players, haven't they? That's the problem now.
Exactly.
But, I mean, they're even expanding outside China. Those kinds of companies.
But WeChat's more of it's like an e-commerce. Not an e-commerce. It's like a messaging and a payment solution, isn't it? So everyone pays.
You can do quite a lot. Payment
but
being one.
But is it the same as? Is it a social media platform in the same way as the feed?
No, it's a bit different from Facebook. It started more like WhatsApp, but now it's expanded its functionality into payment and almost everything else. But that's why I think actually the expectation of China on Facebook is probably overplayed, because there is so much entrenched and local similar services there. So even if Facebook was to be allowed into the market, it would be quite difficult for them to really gear up to the expectation of what the investors have for Facebook's entry into that market. Although you can't discourage Mark Zuckerberg doing all he can to get back into the market. I mean, that's what CEOs are supposed to do. You maximize your shareholders' value. So.
I mean, all he needs is, let's say you go in there and you capture 10% of the market. I mean, that's 100 million people. That's an extra 100 million. That's a significant chunk of change.
Not 100. If you get 100 million, that will give you probably 50-60% of the market.
But I think it's like you say, it's kind of getting past the Great Chinese Firewall, isn't it? It's getting.
We're making a pun by saying the Great Chinese.
That's what it's called, isn't it?
The Great Chinese Firewall.
No, it's not a pun. It's
it's a thing. It is a thing.
It is a thing. Yeah. No, he did everything he could. He ran. He was running in Beijing when he was there.
Tiananmen Square.
And
how would you pronounce it? Sorry.
Yeah, and he was sort of.
He spoke Chinese as well.
He did a Q&A session, didn't he, in Mandarin?
Did he really?
Learned to speak Chinese
He's been
pretty desperate to
dining
get into this
politician.
market.
Yeah, his wife is Chinese American.
Yeah.
But it's
So,
a massive
yeah.
market.
It is. No, you can't discount the importance
this
of
is-
the market.
I mean, the
But-
importance of it from my perspective is that it's similar sort of levels in terms of advertising revenues as the Western markets. So if you
Yeah,
grow
almost, yeah.
if you grow, like their big growth markets this year was, I think, India, the Philippines, and somewhere else. I can't remember where the third one was. But ARPU in Philippines is going to be nothing in comparison to North America or Europe,
Yeah.
and China will probably be on the same lines, or maybe less than North America and less than Europe, but it's going to be certainly substantially more than the Philippines.
Yeah. But I mean, Facebook is doing business in China, so there are Chinese advertisers using Facebook to reach the global audience.
But it's,
So-
it's the users, I think.
No, it's not the audience; it's
Yeah.
the advertisers. So
I
that's-
just think Western firms have had quite a lot of difficulty generally trying to break into China.
Yeah, I think IBM
and-
is one of the few that's actually done quite well out there.
Yeah, but they've
because
all,
they were there early.
this
Yeah.
gets back to a lot of the US issues at the moment, and why people like Chuck Schumer and Mark Rubio get so wound up, because these guys complain that for years, companies that have got technology companies that have got into China have been forced to hand over intellectual property as a condition of going in. They've had all these restrictions on them. It's very hard to operate
You have
there.
to partner with a local
And
firm.
I just can't see the Chinese regulators, like a company like Facebook, which is all about openness to the
Content,
rest of the
yeah.
world and content and sharing free
Yeah.
opinions, and it's supposed to be
Well,
about
that's the thing. That's what Facebook, LinkedIn did. They made a lot of concessions to get entry into the Chinese market.
Yeah.
But
And lately, Apple
lot of-
Apple
Just
did
think-
that as well. You wrote
Facebook's
that
harder to
Apple
police them,
story.
maybe.
yeah, no, no. But they made some concessions on sort of like oversight from
Yeah.
the government.
Right.
I don't think Facebook is prepared
Yeah.
to meet Chinese demands at the moment, and I
Yeah.
think that's the big issue. They're not willing.
Yeah.
Something like Facebook has incredible power for me to be very empowering for the individual and very destabilizing for the Chinese governments, and I think that is
Yeah.
the big issue.
Yeah. No doubt about it. Yeah.
Cool.
We've
Well-
wrapped that one up.
Put me in charge.
We should advise governments.
Yeah, that's it. That's it now, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's us done for the day. I don't think we have a podcast next week. We won't be filming one next Friday, will we, Pierre? Because you're on holiday. So unless Ross,
No,
I can't see him anywhere. Unless Ross wants to come in and do the filming. No,
no.
not happening. No. Okay. Well, see you in a couple of weeks then.
See ya.
See ya.